You are listening to the Mountainside Podcast, and our guest for this episode is my friend Dave Sands. He's a classically trained chef, former San Francisco police officer, podcast host, and outdoor enthusiast. I thoroughly enjoyed having Dave on. We recorded this virtually from San Francisco, and I hope that you enjoy our conversation. This is dope, man, because we actually get to spend it. Even though we hung out. You're on, Dave. Thanks for joining me, man. Are you at home currently, or where are you at?
Yeah, currently at home, and appreciate you having me on. It's an honor.
I'm thrilled to have you. We've gotten to hang out a couple times off of camera and off of the mic, which is cool. And I've known you, a little over a year now, socially, I think. We've been going back and forth, or has it been less than that?
Maybe a little less, but yeah, I just hit you up about podcasting, and then we've been talking ever since.
Congratulations on your podcast, dude. You're crushing it right out of the gate. I think the way that you started, like your first episode was fucking awesome, man. And yeah, for people that are tuning into this thing that don't know Dave just recently started a podcast. It is based around food and food origins and showcasing people's culture. It's a super cool concept. Yeah, man, I've enjoyed listening to, I think you have 3 episodes out currently, right?
Correct.
And probably a 4th by the time that this one drops. So
yeah, I got one. As we're talking, I'm working on the 4th one to release in a couple days.
Awesome. Now, were all of those recorded in San Francisco, or have you been traveling to location, or what's the?
So I'm doing my best to, and so far they've all been recorded in person, and it's just been sporadic as far as location wise. If they have an office, I've done it at their office or a restaurant. Like the 3rd episode, Papa Chai Coffee, that was done at their roastery.
That's cool.
Right there, because they're like, yeah, we can set it up right inside. Right, we were, sitting right next to the roasters. I've done them in, I've done one in my house, one at the first 2. I was fortunate, so I have a couple of people to thank to starting the podcast. But Courtney Henderson, the first guest, owns his own photography studio in San Diego. And he also has his own podcast called The Boisterous Boys, and it's an MMA and fight talk podcast. So he was like, he was very instrumental in putting me on the path. I have 2 other friends, my friend Tim Freeman, who's got Inside BJJ podcast, and he's got his own jiu-jitsu podcast, and then also have Mike Glover, who put me on the path as well. And as you know, Mike's got Fieldcraft Survival and his own podcast, the Mike Force podcast. So with all 3 of those people, with Courtney was like, hey, I'll be your first guest. Why don't you test your gear, bring it all down, and we'll record it in the photography studio and then set it all up and then off and running from there. So thanks to Courtney for
Super dope to have friends like that.
Yeah. I'm super fortunate to kind of, meet him over working at a conference with Jocko at a muster, and Courtney was doing photography. I was volunteering, and he started talking about MMA, and we just hit it off. And I've been to a ton of, huge MMA fan, so we've been talking ever since, and we've been friends ever since. And then when he heard about me trying to start the Food Origins podcast, he was like, oh yeah, get the right gear, I'll help you set it up. And then he ended up being the first guest and doing it right on the studio, and Courtney's really good on the mic. So
yeah, he was awesome. That was a good episode, man.
I really had a good time with him, for sure.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what connected us, right? Because, I mean, you reached out to me and was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing, or I don't know that I helped at all, but I probably gave you some wrong advice.
Well, it was just logistic-wise, just
yeah,
getting things set up, talking to guests. We talked about monetization, but, that's in the future. Right now, I'm just recording episodes, as many as I can.
Yeah, keep after it. So let's dive into a little bit of the premise of the podcast. I
Sure.
kind of mentioned it, and I'm sure that there's a lot more to it, but run me through the premise of Food Origins.
So Food Origins came out of, me being injured. I've been in law enforcement for the last almost 15 years. About 2.5 years ago, I got hurt on duty. Nothing crazy. No, I don't have a fancy story for it. I just fell on duty with all my gear and tore a bunch of muscles in my left arm and back, and my neck's all kind of jacked up. So while I was off, a lot of things kind of happened. I lost my mom to cancer. She passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry,
And
dude.
then I just kind of, I've always been cooking. So let's go back. I'll take you back a little bit further. Like, I can take you all the way back, but I'm born and raised in San Francisco. Kind of give you a little bio. Born and raised in San
Let's just dive into
Francisco.
your background. We got plenty of
Yeah.
time here,
Yeah.
and then we'll
Um,
circle back to it.
sure. Yeah. Born and raised in San Francisco. Grew up there. I've got a huge, you got a mixed race family. My dad's from the East Coast, and my mom is from Japan, Kyoto, Japan. So growing up mixed race was very, got a lot of exposure to just being very diverse. Not only is San Francisco diverse on its own, but like having mixed race parents, and then my godparents are mixed race also, East Indian and American and Caucasian. And so just kind of growing up that way was just, super diverse as far as food, cultures, different religions, different ways of life. So it was very, it was a very nice, kind of way to keep your mind open all the time as far as all that. And it was good. I mean, like, we grew up in
I
the.
grew up the exact opposite of that. I grew up in a small mountain town that I live in currently still, where I'm at right now. But I grew up with a single mom. My family homesteaded here, and not a lot of cultural influence here in the mountain. I mean, other than their values and their premise behind food and what they kept around, it was some traditions. But um, I never really experienced that. Like, I have family members that have never seen the ocean, and they have no desire to. Like, just grew up in the Rocky Mountains, and so I kind of wish I would have gotten that at a younger age. So because I went out and sought after that later in life. That's why I went on tours with rock bands, is I wanted to go see the world and learn about some other cultures and stuff. And I'm super fortunate that I got to do that. And I don't know how I would have if it wasn't for all that. So I got to experience a lot of that later in life, and maybe that made me appreciate it a little bit more. It definitely made me appreciate home a little bit more. But
Yeah.
to grow up in two different like kind of cultures between your mom and dad, I think, is there was there any holiday overlap or anything weird like that? Where was
I
that a
mean,
dumb question?
no, no, it's not. I mean, there are like certain traditions that are done in Japan, but like, obviously when my mom moved to the States, she, wanted to learn, obviously be more Americanized. So it was, we adapted a lot of the typical traditions, Christmas and birthdays and stuff like that. That was all, pretty on the regular. Just, the added bonus of like maybe New Year's, in Japan, they have a New Year's kind of spread where, there's certain dishes that are made, or, you make an extra effort to have something for New Year's Day or New Year's Eve or something like that. Um, and then just, there's a cherry blossom festival that happens once a year. Obviously, San Francisco has a nice Japantown, so a lot of times there's a lot of events there. Of course, that festival, and then a bunch of other stuff. So there's always exposure. And then, my mom would remind us and say like, "Oh, it's Golden Week in Japan," which is like, a big celebration. And she would kind of give us feedback on what things were going on. And I did visit there when I was like 13. I haven't been back. I need to go back, but I've got family there. I've got cousins there
You should, man.
and
It's one of
aunt
my
there.
favorite places to visit, other than being a giant over there. There's
Right.
not much built in Japan for big guys, but But yeah, no, I love the culture, man. Like that, it's just something about like Japanese tradition and how long it's been there, and when you get in some of those older cities and stuff like that, and just the pride that goes into everything, like cleanliness, food, maybe traditions, dress, like it's all kind of it's just very different than American culture.
Yeah, and then my mom, did a lot of the cooking, and so we got a pretty diverse set of food. It wasn't just, you know, it's not necessarily sushi all the time or anything like that, but it was just, my dad, would be like, "Hey, we're having burgers or certain American breakfast, corned beef hash or something like that." And then my mom will, there's steamed rice 24/7 in the house all the time.
Yeah,
And then it's like, what do you add to that? And you just start adding barbecue chicken, or you start making stuff, and it just gets into different stuff. Like a lot of times, an easy one to make is like a tamaki, which is like a hand roll, but it's an open face one. So you just take some of the seaweed, just a little square, add some rice, and then you can just kind of go down the line of adding ingredients. If you have fresh fish, then you can add fish. If you're going to add some salmon, maybe cooked salmon, you can add that, some cucumber, avocado, throw that in a little, open face hand roll, and then dip it in some soy sauce and wasabi,
it's
and
one of my
you're good to
favorites,
go.
man. Yeah, I think those two food groups, American food is pretty damn good, but Japanese food is
Yeah,
up there with my top favorites. And
yeah,
yeah, making me
100%,
hungry, Dave.
100%. And that's the idea. That's the idea, right? That's what the
Yeah,
podcast does. But yeah, so then I was cooking with my mom all the time, and then like, just kind of grew up with that diverse, godparents, East, her husband was East Indian, so like we had Indian food. Most of the time it's vegetarian, so that was, very different. And then just kind of going through all that. But I went to college thinking I was gonna, after high school, thinking I was gonna be a graphic designer, like computer graphics. And then I took like a 3D drawing class, or yeah, 2 and 3D drawing class, and I brought my drawing, and I looked at the guys next to me, and I was like, mine's like a 3-year-old drawing, and that one came out of a Jim Lee comic book. I'm like, okay,
right.
I can draw, but not, to that extent. And I was like, I'm gonna struggle while guys will just, surpass me. And then my ex at the time was like, hey, you always cooked. Why don't you think about cooking? And then my dad hit me up and was like, hey, City College San Francisco has a really good culinary program, because I know one of the other teachers said, mentioned about it. And so I went through their program. They have a 2-year program where they put you through everything from prep, cook, to soups, to salads, to desserts, to, and just all the classics, sauces. And then towards the end of your end of the, teaching, you do a internship at a restaurant or a hotel. So it's either one, it's whichever route you want to go. And I ended up going with a restaurant, and so I started with a Bass restaurant, Frengal, um, in San Francisco, and got to work under Chef Gerald Hiragoyen. Shout out
Nice.
to Gerald. Really good
There's so
chef.
much good food in San Francisco too, man. That place
Yeah,
is
and that
incredible.
exposed me to Basque cuisine, which I didn't know at the time existed, and that's the region in between Spain and France. It's on the border, and so they have a nice mix of food there. And then I just, and then I was off and running after that. Started working at different restaurants, and I cooked for like almost 5 years, doing that. And then I did some corporate food service towards the end, and kind of got burnt out. A lot of work, really low pay. Did everything they asked for. Wasn't getting any raises, and I was like, okay, I need to figure out something else. And I went and got a job at a high end dealer, making more money without even having any much experience. And then I learned the service advisor job while I was there, and made really good money there. And then
Was that like a car dealer?
yeah,
Car dealership?
Mercedes. Yep, yep. And then while I was there, I ran into a police officer, San Francisco police officer, that I had went to culinary school with. And it's just a weird happened chance that we we ran into each other, and then it kind of clicked. He's actually half Japanese like me. Um, and it just clicked. I was like, oh, yeah, that's the other job that I would have wanted to do. And he's like, yeah, man. He's like, you just apply and then go through the process, and we'll see you in a little bit. And I was like, okay, I'll put my name in the interest card. At that time, they weren't hiring, and at that time, it took almost 2 years to get in the department, going through backgrounds and testing and doing the physical tests and all that stuff. And yeah, and then after the dealer, I went into the San Francisco Police Department, became a San Francisco police officer, and I been there. Yeah, that's what I was doing for the last almost 15 years.
Yeah, San Francisco is man, I can't imagine being a police officer there. I'm just going to say that first off in that city for putting up with some of the stuff that you probably have, especially around like that Tenderloin area and some of those spots. You know, I frequent that city pretty often and have spent quite a bit of time in the Bay Area, and I've seen some crazy shit there, man. Like, I can only imagine what you've
Most,
seen.
yeah, I shout out to all my brothers and sisters work in the city. It's not been easy, especially lately, last couple of years, and some of the deterioration of the homeless issues and a bunch of other stuff going on. But yeah, I mean, I got a front front row seat to everything. You know,
Yeah.
when someone sees a police car and a fire engine parked, I mean, we're standing right in front, looking at whatever that is going on. Whether it's somebody got hurt, there's a fire, there's a domestic violence case, someone needs medical help. You name it, it's there, and we're looking right at it. We're in the mix every single time.
Yeah, no, my hat goes off to anybody in law enforcement. I'm a big supporter of back in the blue and red and green and all that military. Everybody, man, because I don't think that it's a job. I think I could do it if I was absolutely called to service or we actually needed it. I would pony up and do it, but it's not something that I would ever go and pursue on my own. What was kind of your, I guess, pull towards that? Was it helping people, or was it just having a career that kept you on your toes, or
Yeah, I had one seed planted when I was a lot younger. I did do a ride along with, like, I think a DA investigator or a detective a long time ago, and I got to see a little bit. He was driving the old Celebrity Classic with the light
nice?
that you hook on the visor. That's how far back that goes. But
Wow.
but that kind of planted the seed back in the day. That would be a cool job. But yeah, for sure, it's definitely about helping people and helping people in many many different situations. And then also sometimes it's just doing you know just security, or you're just there to provide a nice happy face that's providing security when they need it, but it's not necessarily needed. You're just there, provide a good presence. Um, and so it's so what I liked about it is there's never there's never one day that's the same. Everything it's always changing. Every day you're going to do something different. Every day there's a different call. You may think you're starting your shift to go grab a cup of coffee, and nope, you got two calls, and those calls took you all day, and you eating lunch, or you didn't even have your cup of coffee till the afternoon. You're working straight through, and that's could be a robbery call, could be pursuit, wanted suspect, all kinds of stuff. Death in the family, medical calls. Yeah, and that's kind of that keeps you on your toes also, and that makes things interesting too. Like you never have a boring day for sure.
I'm sure the days go by very fast too.
Yeah, when it's like that, yeah, I mean, there are some days where you hope nothing's going on, and that's good too. But it's not always like that for sure. Yeah.
Man, I'll never forget sitting in conversation with you. I can't remember. We were at some coffee shop there in the Bay Area. Do you remember where we were at?
Blue Bottle by the Mint Plaza there. Yep.
Yeah, good cup of coffee there. Shout out to those guys. But But
Yep.
yeah, I'll never forget, sitting down having this conversation with you. And I've talked to a lot of law enforcement people, and I've never really had anybody say this or bring this up in conversation when we were sitting down. You were talking about, rolling through some of these neighborhoods and just trying to be a friendly face and just talk to people. Like, because
Hmm.
a lot of people are intimidated by police officers, I think, including myself, right? Like, it's not
Yeah.
like some of these high profile events that I've worked on, I've gotten to know some of them really well. And I'm the first guy to go up and talk to somebody. But it's definitely when you see an entire SWAT team standing there or something at some of these events that I work at, or maybe we were in the same roof together or something. And, I have to go around and introduce myself so they don't think that I'm somebody trying to kamikaze the show or something. But you had just mentioned that, just trying to be a friendly face and talking to kids and that sort of thing, and not you approaching them a lot of the times, and for good stuff, right? And I thought that was a really cool
Yeah.
approach. What is that something that San Francisco Police Department encourages, or is that something that you came up on your own, or
I think that's just you just understand that you're part of the community. So a lot of times one of the things that I got to do was walk the foot beat. So I was on foot and actually on 24th Street. And so when you walk the beat, you see a lot more, you see a lot more people, and yeah, you're encouraged to go talk to the businesses, and you really get to know your beat. You kind of learn your beat. I know New York is known for having a lot of beat cops, and you get to know that those streets, you get to know the alleys, you get to know every business because you're walking it every day. So you're interacting with everyone, whether it's someone that's crossing the line and doing something bad, but then there's plenty of good people out there that just want a good conversation, or maybe they need some information about something, or how a process goes about, like how do they make a report for something that got missing or a break-in, or how do we sometimes it's just giving them advice about, hey, you might want to have some security cameras, you might want to have better lighting here, you might want to have some motion lighting at nighttime if you're having problems with break-ins or people peeking into your business, or just meeting the restaurants. And for me, I was fortunate to be in the Mission, and the Mission is definitely the hotbed of restaurants coming out of San Francisco. There's
yeah,
always new restaurants there, and then they have some really good historic ones. So I was fortunate to, like, okay, cool, I'm walking the beat, and maybe I'm grabbing a burrito, or I'm grabbing some Burmese food, I'm grabbing a banh mi from someplace. Obviously, the Mission's known for its Latin community, the Latino community, so it's heavy on the Latin food, but like it's got everything else too. There's bakers, there's Phil's Coffee has come out of there. Like I was
yeah,
telling you with Blue Bottle, Blue Bottle was in another district, but they came out of San Francisco, and they've blown up to a huge company. So it's cool seeing that stuff too, seeing those businesses grow. So that's really neat. Sometimes you'll see a restaurant open, and then they're like, oh well, I worked at a restaurant downtown, and now I'm in the Mission, and then you see them grow, and you get to interact with them, and you make sure they're okay, especially a new business, and especially when they open up, and maybe we know that if there's an issue, if there's gangs hanging out, we're like, hey, make sure things are locked, make sure maybe you're going to need a gate on this place because unfortunately there's some gangsters that hang out here a little bit in this area, so make sure things are squared away. So it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of a little bit of both.
no, I was shocked the last time I was in the city, right there at Union Square. I walk into where the show site was at. There was, I think it was a Macy's or something, whatever's right there on the mall. They had electric
Hmm.
fence like put up in front of the doors.
Oh,
Like it was
okay.
some sort of electrical barrier. Like I think I took
Hmm.
a photo of it, but that was kind of wild to me. I was like, God damn,
Yeah.
they've had to go to this extreme to keep it out. And like, I don't know, man. It's just how much, like, from when you first started with San Francisco PD to now, has the crime rate, I mean, obviously it's climbed, but a lot of it is legislatively they've decriminalized a lot of things that would be normal laws, right? Like shoplifting and some of that. Like, how much harder
Yeah.
did that make your job? And just like some of the stuff that I've seen you guys put up with, just being there, a week at a time or 2 weeks at a time or something is kind of wild, man.
It makes it extremely difficult. I think the easiest way to say it is, it's if there's no consequences to your actions, then it's going to keep happening. That's the easiest way to say it. Like you said, everything else, it's there's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of levels to what is going on, with staffing and services that need to be provided. And it's a case by case with each person, but with each act. But it's if there's no consequences for your actions, like it's going to keep happening. And then, the next person says, "Oh, well, he only got a slap on the wrist and he's out on the street already. Well, I'm going to go do it too."
Right.
So, yeah, it makes it extremely difficult.
And what has that done from an officer standpoint? I mean, I'm sure that people are frustrated trying to enforce laws, or they've been trying to enforce laws for numbers of years, and then all of a sudden you can't enforce those anymore. Has there been a high turnover rate from your firsthand experience, or I mean, how are we keeping? I would get so frustrated as a police officer right now. I don't know how we're even retaining them.
Shout out to everybody working, but there are
Yeah,
some really great cops out there working hard no matter what. You just ride the thing. It's not to say it's any other job, but like any other job where there are different things, you get bosses change, different employees leave, different policies get shown up. You just kind of have to ride with what you're dealt with. There's still plenty of great cops working hard, working the street, doing homicide cases to traffic enforcement to event support. Now they have the Warriors there, so they're having to, shout out to the Warriors. They're in the,
they are crushing it right
NBA.
now. Yeah,
They're crushing it in the NBA Finals. We'll see what happens, but so you have that. You have the Giants. So there's a vast um, details to be working on. So they're still working day to day, no matter what. So there's some really great cops working. It is, but on the other side, like you said, it is tough to keep people employed and keep people wanting to stay there when it's difficult. Where you arrest somebody for a crime and you have a difficulty getting that case prosecuted, and then you see that person out on the street. Sometimes it's within hours.
wow.
Sometimes it's next day, and a lot of these cops work the street. They work a similar area. They know their area. They know their guys and the people that are out there on the street, and they're going to see them again. And that can be very very frustrating for sure, especially if they know that person's going to be doing another crime and they're having to arrest them multiple times
I can't imagine,
over and
man.
over again.
Yeah.
So that part can be very frustrating for sure.
Well, I didn't want to dwell on that, but it's always something that interests me, especially in that city. And,
Hmm.
anybody that I've ever dealt with in law enforcement there, including yourself, has been fucking awesome. So good people.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah, shout
you
out
know,
to everybody there.
yep, for sure. And then just, but yeah, I mean that. So yeah, in transition, as people know when this podcast comes out, I'm transitioning out of law enforcement just because of my injuries, and part of being off and kind of figuring out different things, I got put on the path for the podcast to start a podcast with food, and everyone's like, hey, you always cooked. I cooked, even at the station. A lot of my coworkers will know, my friends will know when they hear this, that I've cooked for them. Some will say I never have, and I have, but it's been fun doing that. I enjoy, like that's part of cooking for me is seeing happy faces and seeing them like, oh, that's really great. Like I'm glad you tried this dish today. I've made a turducken for for some of the troops. I've done definitely, obviously barbecues for sure. Chicken, ribs, tri-tip is, the gold standard.
Yeah,
I
baby.
didn't do too much burgers and hot dogs because that's just, you can get that at home. So I tried to change it up. Um, and then, I know things are getting even more. Some people got smokers at the station, so they're stepping it up a notch, like doing brisket and some other stuff. But yeah, so all the cooking I did, even throughout everything, all the other jobs, and of course when I was cooking professionally, I just took that with me, and then all the experience of eating at all the restaurants, doing a little bit of traveling. Um, I've been to the Philippines, I've been to, Hawaii, not a ton in the United States, but I've, been around, and, San Francisco's got so much to offer.
Yeah, it does.
Then, just a little bit of that experience I had when I was in Japan, but just taking all that cooking and food experience, and it was like, you know what? I think I want to talk about food, and then I also want to hear people's stories. So, everyone has an origin story. That's where that name comes from, that origin. And it's talking to people about their origin story. So I'm not expecting them to be a chef. I'm not expecting them to be a restaurant owner or restaurateur. But if they are, then of course we're going to talk about that. But I want to hear their story. I want to hear how they, what they ate growing up, what culture, what their cultural background is, their ethnicity, and then we get into their childhood eats. We get into maybe some of the things you didn't like, and then what changed as you turned into an adult. And a lot of times it definitely changes. You like things
Oh
that you
yeah.
didn't like, or maybe you just say, you know what, I still don't like it. And then we can just kind of go into uh, best and worst restaurants. I like to hear the worst restaurants because people have a lot of bad experiences, and restaurants need to know that. Like, hey, you guys screwed up. Like, it's not always perfect. It's not always happy, and they need to know, they need to step it up. And then you get the best restaurants, so you get to hear some really cool stories about what people ate all over the place. And then we get into, either if they're food related, we get into their business of food, or we just did, dive into that person's, origins as far as that, and then open it up to just a conversation as well. So that's kind of the gist. Yeah,
No, it's super dope.
that's it.
It's a great concept. And how much are you enjoying podcasting? Because it's like one of my favorite things to do. Because I get to hang out. It's an uninterrupted conversation. I guess people are digging it so far. That's why I keep doing it. So yeah, I think
It's definitely a lane I never, like if you talked to me 2 years ago, I would have never known I would be doing it.
yeah, me
And
too.
then now because obviously we listen to podcasts. There's all the great podcasters are out there. And then now that I have one, I'm like, okay, I want it to be similar, or at least give them that nice conversation, that information that they're looking for. And now that I'm doing it, I'm really enjoying it because it's taking me places I'd never been to. I'm trying new things that I've never done, whether, not just talking to a new person, but like sometimes there's food involved, so it give you a sneak peek, because I got to interview Andy Mokel. Andy Mokel's the flip flop guy. So shout out to Andy. And I got to try his Axis deer done the flip flop way. And that's his with his family recipe of a marinade and everything. And that was phenomenal. Phenomenal stuff. If you don't know his flip flop style, I mean, you'll hear it on the podcast too, but like when it comes out later this year. But he basically takes a venison leg quarter and cleans it up, cleans all the silver skin up, takes his marinade with some red wine that's mixed with, so it's his family recipe marinade with some red wine. That gets mixed together. It gets brushed with a rosemary brush onto the venison. He's got a hot charcoal grill going. Flips that on to start getting seared. He'll do that he'll marinate the other side, flip it back over, and he's only doing this for like a minute, minute and a half. Flips it over, and it's seared. The marinade is seared in there. He's also put salt and pepper on there, and then he's just slicing it off and handing it off, either with a piece of French bread with a little bit of butter, or just the meat itself. And sometimes there's catered sides, sometimes there's nothing, and everyone's just hanging out. and they're just taking slabs of, slices of meat off and eating it, and it's some of the best meat I've ever tasted. And I'm still new to the hunting game, but as hunters, they know, like, you probably know axis deer is one of the best meat
Oh,
out
it's
there.
incredible.
And I had heard so much about it from everyone else, and finally getting to taste it, I was like, okay, now I understand.
Now I
It's
get it.
super
Yeah.
good, super good. Really, I think the best way to say it's really tender. It's not gamey at all, and with Andy's marinade, it just makes it that much better.
Now, is that something that he sells, or is it family secret, or?
Yeah, so he sells his marinade. It is a family secret. It's his recipe. It's his family's recipe. It's his grandfather's recipe, and it's just that style of cooking. And he's just really good at it. And now he's starting to cook all over the country doing it that way. The
Super
method
dope.
of flip flop comes out of West Marin. It's like kind of a hunter's thing to do because it's usually with venison. And he grew up in Marin County, so that's north of San Francisco. So that flip flop style is around. It's just you add Andy's family's recipe and his style of cooking it, and it just comes out really good. And so that's a person I was following for a while, and I just happened to run into him, and then I ran into him, and then we ended up doing a podcast. So like that was an amazing experience just right there, and that happened just from me doing the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's super great. The connections that I've made, the friends that I've made, more than that, not even connections.
Hmm.
I've formed so many friendships out of this, including yourself. I think
Yeah, I
your
mean,
episode 93 coming up, and it never gets old, man. It's like
wow.
I'm excited to come in. I was excited to come in and talk to you. Luckily, we got this thing going with all the technical crap at the beginning,
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's all
it's
right.
yeah. No,
I mean,
it's totally worth it. All the other headaches that come with having a podcast, and I'm not going to lie, there is some headaches, but like this is the golden hour or the golden minute or the golden whatever you want to call it, man. And
hmm
one of the coolest things about it is it's archived too. So like you can almost kind of relive that moment.
yeah, and that's how I found you. Basically, I found you, and I think if you remember Andy Arabito's podcast, I listened to your
Yeah,
podcast with Andy, and then I was like, oh, that's cool, dude. And then that's how I knew about your podcast. Then I heard about the Mountainside, and then the rest is history.
it's
And
crazy
that was a
how it
great
grows like
podcast.
that. And shout out to
Yeah.
Andy, man. What an awesome human,
Yep.
man. He's been nothing but gracious with his time with me, and he's just a dude in life that's just fucking crushing it.
Definitely. Andy's crushing with the knives. He's got half face blades. I'll give a plug for him. He's got a cola. So like, and that kind of leads into some of the things that I get tied into. So like, Andy's got a collab hot sauce. So with half face blades and Senior Lechuga, that is the name of the of the hot sauce company, Senior Lechuga hot sauce, and he's got a
And it's
collab sauce with
killer,
them.
by the way. It's like,
It's
oh
super
my
good.
God, dude.
And it's super good. It's ridiculously good.
It's
And
legit.
that's one of the things that kind of attached me to Andy besides the blades. And most of us, if you know Andy, you probably own one. He's got the hot sauce, and now Andy's working on a wine. So he's got Warpaw wine coming out. He's got a red wine, and I think he's got a Chenin Blanc coming out too, and that's out of Napa, like up north. And he's working with Lucier Wine. It's a veteran owned company, so like crushing it there too. So like, yeah, and it's just getting to know those things, and I think I talked to you about some of the other, just using other products and becoming friends with those companies. I think that just helps, and then I just like sharing that as well. So like, that hot sauce. Hey, make sure you guys get it because it's super good. I want someone else to have that great experience, and I've kind of done that with a lot of the restaurants that I used to eat at. If you do a deep dive on my Instagram, most of it was like, here's a restaurant I ate at, and I kind of got, once the pandemic hit, I kind of got tired of that, and shout out to my wife who's like, hey, like it's great you're promoting another restaurant. You're not really, you're not getting anything out of it other than supporting them. But she's like, why don't you just start showing some of your cooking that you're doing at home or, out and about. So then that's when you see now like 99% of the food that comes on the pictures now is all my cooking. So either I did it for someone else, I did like a mini catering gig, or I just cooked up some barbecue chicken for a party, or I were just cooking at home, trying new stuff. And then just playing with different sauces and stuff. And that's what's kind of tied into, the podcast as far as other guests and, future guests. And that's fun. And that's a lot of fun.
For sure, man. And I encourage anybody that's listening to this, if you're even thinking about starting a podcast, just do it, man. Give it a try. You never know. Like,
Yeah.
this is something that I just kind of fell into. It's something that was kind of came to you on a spur, and there's some uncertainty going into it. There's plenty of people out there to help you. I think that that's one cool thing about you is that you're not keeping a lot of these things as like super trade secrets, or you're not afraid to reach out to somebody and ask for advice and then share that with somebody else, which I think is super cool. That's the main reason why you and I hit it off so well, I think, because I'm very much the same way. And I encourage people to do that too, man. If just help somebody out if they ask you for help.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's so much to learn. I mean, I think I talked to you about it. I lost the podcast due to a power outage, and I didn't have a backup, and I wasn't able to press stop before the power. Well, obviously, I didn't know the power was going to go out, and lost the whole podcast. But in turn, it turned into a better podcast, which is actually the one that's coming out soon. Is that I ended up recording with another person as well. So now I got two guys, and you guys will hear that podcast. They're both from Saipan. It's a it's a conservatory of the United States island, and they're both born and raised there. And I got to record with both of them instead of one of them. So you know,
Super cool.
as far as I hate to be a cliche, but when things happen for a reason, I mean, things happen for a reason is what I'm trying to say. Is it's kind of crazy to say that, but it does. It does. And
I
and
agree
you
with
meet
that
certain people.
sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not agree with it at the time. Like I didn't ask to lose my mom. I didn't ask to get injured. I
Right.
didn't,
Yeah.
ask for a lot of things to happen. I can't explain those things, but we try to push forward. And I heard from shout out to Eric Williams. He said, sometimes you get angels in your life, and you gotta take those into consideration because they're there for a specific reason. They may not be there for a very long time, but they're there at a specific moment, and they take care of you in that moment, and then they're off. You know, so sometimes you might have that one person that says, "Hey, this is what you need to do. This will get you to from A to B to C. Do those things, and you'll be off and running." And then you may never talk to that person again, but you're like, every time you go back to it, you're like, "Man, he told me this little technique on the podcast, and I've used it ever since." But I'm not going to talk to the guy. I don't know what happened to. It's just that one. You got that one little nugget, and you take it with you.
For sure, man. And we did our last episode was around suicide awareness, and I got very emotional during it, and it was a rough one for me. But one thing that keeps coming back to me is I have a super close friend that was on the brink of killing himself. One of the things that I got from him that I will never forget is he was just talking about, and I don't mean to bring this up again, but I think it's super important. He was just talking about like how everyday little tasks were so hard to deal with, like whether it was doing the dishes or filling up your car with gas or whatever it was. It was just like the most draining thing for him. And somebody told him, like even with the bad stuff that's happened to you, focusing on what's good that came out of that bad thing is one of the most important things that you can do for your mental state, So instead of focusing on like, oh my God, this sucks, or I can't believe this, or whatever, like focus on what is good coming out of it, even if it's the most minute thing. And that's changed my perspective a little bit, like, so I've had those podcasts where and I'm not comparing that to like a third world problem or somebody that's dealing with a death or suicide by any means, but we've definitely had some adversity here. I mean, I face it in the backcountry sometimes, and it's really made me like take it just a couple steps back and look at that and be like, okay, yeah, so I can kind of see, whether it's you say it's happening for a reason or whatever, but if you can just focus on that good portion that comes out of whatever that adversity is, I think is key in life, man, because you're gonna face it. Life is not all cherries and
Yes.
rainbows or whatever that cliche saying is.
Yeah, and just to shed a light on in law enforcement, there's a huge problem with that, with mental health.
Yeah.
You see such crazy things, it can cause you to be pretty stressed out. And it's finding an activity that helps you get through it. Um, you know, and that's what helps me, you know. Cooking is one of them. I like to say cooking is my therapy, and especially when my mom passed away, it was my attachment to her. But while I was working the streets and working in the department, it's just you had to find an activity, whether it was jujitsu, archery. Those two
Yeah.
were really great. Um, you know, I'll probably talk to you like offline about this, but I'd like to start a nonprofit archery kind of club for law enforcement for first responders. It's just a good way to de-stress. I'm still working to get back to it, but my shoulder's still having issues. But I'd like to share that experience. As you know, if when you take a skill, especially kind of a semi-primitive, but you use a compound that you get modern technology with primitive skills, it's just a nice de-stressor. Just is what I'm trying to say is find an activity that de-stresses you, whether it's getting a good workout in, even if it's for just a half an hour, and just kind of letting you calm down a little bit, or just finding that other passion. And for me, was easy with food. Jiu-jitsu is another one. That's an easy one, and archery. Those three were really good. And then just being outside, going
I love
camping.
all that stuff, man,
You
and I
know,
totally think that you
yeah,
should. I think it would be great for,
yeah,
I know it's great for former military guys. We've had a lot of guys on the podcast that have,
hmm
are double amputees and are into archery or, you know, I think for me personally, and I can't speak for everybody, but I'm not a guy to get up in the morning and meditate or anything. I meditate behind the riser of my bow, man. Like when you're going
hmm
through like a shot sequence, and I've gotten a little bit more spiritual with it, even though I'm still shooting a compound. Like, after taking some training from like Tom Clum and some of these top archery coaches that I've been fortunate enough to know and have on the podcast and whatnot, I've come up with my own like little shot mantra that I run through my head before I shoot, and it's the only time, short of, I guess you could get the same feeling from riding a motorcycle or maybe rolling on a jiu-jitsu mat or a wrestling mat,
yeah,
whatever. It's just that clarity in your mind to only focus on what you're doing and not thinking about your day to day, like, oh my God, I got to mow the lawn or I got to whatever these first world
hmm
problems are, right? Which can be
yeah,
stressful in their own right. But like for me, that's my meditation. If I don't get 30 or 40 arrows in a day, I'm pretty grumpy, man. Like, especially when I'm
yeah,
traveling, like to the point where I travel with, I have this little setup that, so I can at least go through my shot sequence daily, even if it's 10 or 15 times or whatever in the morning. That's typically my routine, even when I'm traveling, but I think just having that little bit of decompression or that 30-second break, that might accumulate over 60 shots of your mind,
yeah.
just focusing on one thing and not being able to wander other places is key, man. So I know a lot of guys firsthand that attest, to archery being, that for them and also therapeutic because there's some serious gratification in it. I mean, I would consider it a martial art almost.
Yeah, it's definitely an art, and and it's also sometimes just getting them out there and getting them a feel for it.
Being
It does
outside.
take it's just being outside, but it's also like it does take a little bit to get them kind of set up. So it's like it would just be nice to do an event, let them see what it's all about, get a feel for it, understand that, yeah, some bows cost more. There's some
Yep.
entry level, there's some mid level, but this is how you do it, and this is where you can do it. And then, getting that activity going. But like for me, I lost archery for a while, for a good while, and I'm barely coming back to it. And so being injured with, with people with injuries, like I can't do jujitsu, couldn't do archery, and then the only thing I could do once my arm was a little bit better, start cooking, and so that's kind of where the podcast came out of, and cooking becoming my therapy because that's all I could do, and it's just finding that activity, whatever it is, and it may not be the one you can do for a while, maybe you hurt your leg and you like to run, well now you've got to figure out something else.
Right.
And I talked to, a one of these big trainers, and they're like, "Hey, your left arm doesn't work." I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Do you have a right arm and two legs?" And yes. And he's like, "Okay, well then work those, you know, you can still work those, and then, worry about the other one as it comes." But just finding that other activity and finding cooking for me, at least for me, it's very therapeutic. I find it like I super enjoy it, and especially when I get to cook for somebody else, I get the most out of it for
I
sure.
enjoy cooking
And that
myself,
kind of,
man. So
yeah.
yeah, and I'm not any good at it by any means. Like I couldn't bake you a pie or a cake or something. That's all my daughters. But
Well,
when it comes to grilling or something like that, I have my own little like trade secrets and stuff that I like to
yeah,
do, and I pretty much do it daily, man. I'd rather do that, especially the diet that I'm on currently. I'd rather cook for myself. It's so much better than going to a majority of restaurants, right? That I've found just because I get what I want, I know what I like, but also the process of it, right? Too. It's like I think that that's some of the gratification that comes with hunting too. Is there's a ton in that, and that's really the only reason I do it is I want to source my own food as much as possible, and it's super gratifying when you sit down and it's something that maybe came out of your garden or maybe you had to quarter up or bone out to get it off the side of a mountain or out of a freaking ravine or you know all that sort of stuff. It puts a little bit more value on it to the point where I think we have this huge disconnect in the US right now with food waste, like how many restaurants just pile on the food on your plate and you can't literally sit there and eat it all. So a
yeah.
lot of times when I'm traveling, it's like I end up throwing food away cuz it's too much to eat. I don't have anywhere to store it, so it's a shame. In
Well,
San
and
Francisco,
there's
I'm
and it
always bagging it up and giving it to the homeless guy on the corner, but
that's very nice of you. And a lot of times, but also it's just finding good food in general. Um,
100%, yeah.
that I found with a lot of people. I get hit up all the time, like, "Hey, I'm in this place. Where should I go for Japanese food? Where should I go for, you know, Mexican or dim sum or whatever it is?" But it's me wanting to give them that best experience, but two, just finding a really good spot. I'm gonna never do my best. I try to bat at 1,000 and give you the best possible place I can give you. Even if I haven't been there, I'll do some research and be like, all right, it's by majority everyone's saying it's great, or I've been there and I can tell you this is what you get. I know the owner or I know who cooks there. This is what the dishes are. But I think like you're saying with hunting, the hunters know the whole process, but the general public needs to understand it a little bit more. But also,
Yeah.
I think we're kind of all getting more health conscious after all this COVID nonsense going on, and everyone trying to get a lot more healthier. But it's always been that way, and it's still going to be, you know, a focus because we've got to understand there's a lot of like just fake food. And I'm not talking just about the fake meat, but I'm like, there's just a lot of food we don't need. And we're all guilty of munching on it because they're snacks and they make them taste good and they give you a ton of ads and you're inundated with it right in the middle of the supermarket. And all the things you're supposed to eat are on the outside. That's produce. I just shout out to Max Lugaver. He's a good. He wrote Genius Foods, and he's like, the best food you're supposed to eat is meat, fish, chicken, produce. That's pretty much it, and liquids and vitamins and stuff. It's everything on the outside, everything in the middle, you could probably deal without for the most part.
I've never really thought about it that way. That's
Yeah.
interesting. And if you think
And
about
it's
it, all
hard to
that
do
bullshit's in the middle, you know?
for the most part. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and it's a tough thing because we all love, I mean, chips are great, but like, are they long term great for you? Probably not, but then you can go to a restaurant where they made them fresh, like I was just talking to my wife about tortillas and stuff. Having fresh tortillas
Oh my god,
are
that's a world of
you
difference, man.
yeah, it's 100%. And I'm also in a mixed marriage. My wife's, she's Mexican, so like it adds another element. But knowing that there is that an entire culture, entire community is based off a tortilla. You know what I mean? Like they, like a majority of their cuisine, and we just saw somebody feed Phil on Netflix, which is Phil Rosenthal's show. He's the host. He went to Oaxaca, and like seeing all the Oaxacan cuisine there, it was like amazing food there. The mole, and watching the fresh tortillas and watching them get made on the comal, which is the hot, basically a hot plate over fire. And then just getting that experience and knowing that, okay, that's what you should be eating because that comes from the earth. It was made fresh. It wasn't, thrown together in a factory with a bunch of ingredients or chemicals, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
and it's getting back to that original thing. And like I kind of ran into this with my dad. I was like, my dad, when he was 20s, it's in the 50s and 60s, and their food is different than our food now, for sure. Like as far as
Yeah.
chemically enhanced, right? And so it's
And
going
produce
back
for
to
the
whole,
masses, man. There's a lot more people to produce food for now,
yeah,
you know? Like
yeah. And so that's tough, when someone's like, "Oh, I found this like non-fat, vegan, blah 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 yogurt." I was like, "What happened to just yogurt?" And if you look at what a plain yogurt, full fat yogurt has, and what a man, this other branded named, that's got 5 names to it, and you flip them over and you look at the ingredients, you're like, well, there's 20 ingredients in this, you know, crazy named yogurt, and then plain yogurt just says non-fat yogurt, or
well, it's crazy.
just
Even
says
if you're on the
it
outsides,
just says cultured milk, and that's it.
right? Even if you're on the outsides of the grocery store, you got to be careful what you pick up, especially if you're at the butcher counter. Like I'm
Yeah,
being super conscious, or I'm being super conscious because I'm on this very strict diet at the moment. But just picking up meat and assuming that it's burger, it may not be 100% burger. There may be some fillers, there may be some additives, there may be some carbs in meat, which is mind blowing to me sometimes, and some of
yeah, and
these
especially
restaurant
if it's
chains and
like
stuff.
a yeah, that, and because you don't know where it's coming from. And a lot of times don't feel bad that you're just asking, like, hey, where did you guys source the fish?
Sure.
Where's, did you guys, is it farm raised? Is it, fresh fish? Is it from Alaska? I mean, I know it's getting picky, but it's also like it's going in your body, and if we're all trying to get healthier and be healthy in general, you got to know where everything's coming from, and it helps. It kind of gives you a reassurance, like, okay, that's, it's coming from a legit spot.
Oh, those are great points, man. And buying locally, I know that that's a cliche thing right now, but it's important, man. I think just because of
Yeah, and it's
like
it's not always easy to do though, too.
right, yeah. No, I agree.
But most
Especially in a
definitely,
grocery store, yeah. But like those farmers
yeah.
markets and stuff are, especially in California, man.
Oh
That's
man,
one
they're
thing I
awesome.
miss about living there is the farmers markets are incredible.
Yeah, really, really good. There's always local farms. We have a ton here, so we're really fortunate. But I mean, all over the U.S. has got, you got a lot of nice cattle farms doing regenerative farming.
Yeah,
Um, I started getting some meat from Crosso Meats. They're out in Idaho. They do a nice meat. They got a nice cattle farm. They got pigs as well. And so it's just getting meat that you know where it's coming from, the process that they do, and then just just kind of just getting stuff that has less ingredients in it, that's not that's
It's
not
not me. It's my
yeah.
dog. She's in the background. She's groaning. It's not my ass.
Oh,
So
I thought that was the cow noise you got on there. I was like, that's cool.
it was
It
on
was like
point.
moo.
She's like, when do
Yeah.
we get to go to the river, man? She's all,
But
it's
yeah,
so
I mean,
fucking
you get
nice
my
here right
point.
now.
I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
there's plenty of other farmers that can talk about it. I'm not a farmer, but
There's so many companies
we're
too
all,
that are direct to consumers, like ranches and stuff.
yeah,
We've had some of them on
yep,
here, and shout out to Colorado Craft Beef. They've been hooking me up with all my
mm-hmm,
beef, and it is fucking incredible. And
right,
it's a spot where they invite you to come out to see their operation. The entire process is done at their ranch to where they put it in a box, and then beyond that, they're being, if you want to talk about somebody that's or companies that are being conservative towards the environment, like the packaging that they send it in, because I've ordered from some big name like direct to consumer brands, and it comes in all this like packaging to get it there cold, but theirs is kind of cool. It's made of corn, and you can literally wash it down your sink, like it just
oh
dissolves.
wow,
Super cool
okay,
insulation. So they're like taking it a step further. So I enjoy spending that. It is a little bit more expensive than going to the grocery store, but not really. And I don't mind spending that little bit of extra money knowing exactly where it came from, who's packing the boxes, and then also
mm-hmm,
having that, that eco-friendly packaging and all that sort of stuff. I think that's worth that little bit of extra money to me. But let's dive into food, man. We've been this
yeah,
is great, man. We're burning through the time, but I want to talk to you about some cooking tips. I need some cooking tips. I'm sure the listeners would like to
sure.
listen to that. You're a classically trained chef. You invest a ton of time in it, and you can tell just by talking to you how passionate you are about it, which is super cool. We were just talking about ingredients and sourcing local stuff. How important are the ingredients when you start cooking? Like, are you going all over the place to source these things, or is it just a one-stop shop? How much does that matter to you?
Um, it definitely matters. So like, if you want something to taste right, and the recipe calls for a particular herb, and you try to throw in something else, you can't expect it to taste what you want. So there are times where you can, alternate and like play with stuff. If you're doing that, like you're just okay, I'm just going to put together something in the house and whatever I have. But if you're following a recipe, it's good to stick with it. And then as far as getting ingredients, it varies. So like meat wise right now, like I was telling you, I'm either getting it from local butcher. I like Whole Foods because Whole Foods will tell you where the meat is from or what stage, what kind of, is it organic and all that good stuff. It gives you all that stuff. Trader Joe's, if I really have to, they've been getting better at sourcing meat, but I try to do, obviously the butcher or the, a cattle farm, and then as far as vegetables, yeah, like supermarket, farmers market, those are always good. Fresh herbs. From there, I don't have a garden, but someday we'll have a homestead and have all that good stuff. But if we have it, we'll use what we got at home. My wife's really starting to grow some stuff, even in on our little patio. She's got, we had lettuce, so we were able to use, some red leaf lettuce, some romaine. She's got some Yukon Golds going, and also just sometimes it's just using just the right ingredients for the right, for that recipe. Try not to change it and then expect a different result. Like you and I could get a baked potato recipe. Your recipe is going to come out different than mine. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, even if we follow it to the T, it might even look differently. And it's like, well, I got a, bigger potato. Oh, I got, I didn't use sour cream. I used, butter, or I swapped out, chives for green onions, and I used ham instead of bacon. And so, like, when you alter it, which is okay, nothing wrong with that. It's just if you're trying to get a certain result, then you've got to stick to, getting the recipe, and then it's just executing your prep, and which that helps a lot. I think a lot of people don't like taking that extra step or that extra time. And I understand people are busy, but if that extra prep is done prior, like all those ingredients are already in house, then you can put that thing together. Like you have, and of course I'll go to an Asian market as well. Bay Area is known for really good Asian markets. We have Korean Asian markets, we have Japanese, and then we have ones that have just everything from Thai food, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, um, just a whole mix of stuff in there. So then you can go in there and find lemongrass. You can find Thai basil. You can find you know fresh vegetables that you wouldn't normally find. You're not going to find it your local supermarket like Safeway or something that we have here. I'm not going to find Thai basil there. It's not happening.
Right.
So if there's a certain ingredient that you want that you need, you gotta do a little bit of legwork to get it. But sometimes it's just worth it to have it because it's going to taste really, really good. Like if you can't some things you can't replace. Like if it calls for a certain flavor, you got to have that thing. And then if you don't have it, great, you can make it without it. But it's just not gonna, like if you're trying to duplicate a recipe from a restaurant or something at home, you got to try to stick to it. But there's always that door where you're like, hey, you know what? I don't have basil. I have thyme, or I have another herb, and you just throw it in there. And you're like, cool. You know what? This is my recipe now. This is the way I'm
Yep.
doing it, and then it becomes your own. So I often do that a lot of times, and I'm sure you do. Like if you get a dry rub from somebody, or your buddy's got a dry rub, you start using it, or a hot sauce, you start using it, and it just starts, melting the recipe into something else. But
Yep.
yeah, I think just going out, doing the legwork, having stuff on hand. So a lot of times having stuff in the pantry, like your basics, having flour if you need it, having, the baking powder, having cornstarch if you need to thicken sauces, having a nice sea salt and pepper. So I use a pepper mill to crush the pepper. And then lately I've been using Malden sea salt, which is a nice flaky salt. It's really nice for steak. It's really nice for everything else. It's really big kernels, flat kernels, or whatever you want to call them, the flakes, and it's really good salt. Yes, it does cost more, but it's super, super high quality. So it's
I
like
need to
you're
step
gonna
up my
get.
salt game, so you got to send me some of these offline or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's just Maldon salt, and then just getting, and then so I just it changed over time, and then just finding other ingredients. Like I've been playing with black garlic a lot. Black garlic is a fermented garlic. It's turned jet black. This is my shirt, and it gives it a mild flavor. It doesn't have that pungent garlic flavor, and it gives it just another element. I've been doing a lot of smoked chicken thighs with that on the Traeger, and it comes
Nice.
out really good. I have kind of a secret recipe there. I won't give that one up, but I'm working on that. I'd like to work on my own seasoning at some point. I'd like to do like a dry rub slash like just seasoning that you could do for
I
barbecuing or
love dry
smoking meats
rubs,
and
man.
stuff.
Like that's where it's at
Yeah,
for me for sure when it comes to grilling
yeah.
and stuff. Is I'm a big dry rub fan. So let
So
me know when you get it out.
just
I'll
as
be your first customer.
yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. And if there's someone out there that knows how to make them and get them out in production, hit me up. But I think that, just to sum it up, is having stuff, uh, the little things on hand that helps you form the recipe. Like, I mean, I guess being Asian, I'm gonna have a lot of Asian ingredients that not everybody has. But if you go out and go get those, and then you don't have to hunt for them later. You can have rice vinegar, you have fish sauce, you obviously have soy sauce. There's a lot of other soy sauces and bases that you can see at the market, and sometimes it's just trying other stuff. The English, even if it's in Japanese or Korean or whatever, there's usually an English explanation. At least they try to, or just ask somebody and say, "Hey, what's this for?" "Oh, that's for cold noodles," or "That's for soup," or "That's for Korean barbecue." And I found a Korean barbecue one, and it's super good because it's got this flavor profile that nothing else I have has. And so when you barbecue something and then you dip that in there, you got this, awesome flavor of a little bit of spice, a little bit of soy. It's probably got ginger. It's probably got garlic. And then, adding all that stuff in there, it's just having it on hand helps with the rest of the cooking. So having, that in the pantry, then all you have to go out and get is the main course, the core ingredients, whether it's, if you're doing rice or you're doing vegetables, you're doing a meat or you're doing a fish, then that makes it easy because you can find those pretty easy. It's all the little ingredients. Just having that ahead of time, and then everything else just putting it together.
Absolutely. I got to step up my dry rub game too, so you have to send me some recommendations on that. When it comes to
There's a
cooking,
couple, yeah.
yeah, if you want to shout them out now, that's cool too. So,
uh, he's actually already a guest. Yeah, there's a guy. He's already a guest on the podcast. It'll be coming out later this year. It'll be a swap cast because he's really into food. Shout out to Dave Williamson. He's a stand-up comedian. He opens for Bert Kreischer, and he's got his own dry rub. And he uses like pizza pretzel salt and then a bunch of other
okay.
seasoning. And so he came up with his own. I like using that one. As you know, Traeger's got their a bunch.
Yep.
And then Montana Mex has a nice trio of seasoning. So Chef Eduardo Garcia's got, I don't know if you know who that is, but he's got an amazing
I know the
story. He's also
name,
a
but
hunter.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yep.
got an amazing story. Shout out to Eduardo. He's got an amazing company. He's got like a trio of seasonings where there's a chili seasoning, he has a jalapeno seasoning, and then he has a sweet seasoning. So you can do like it's got cinnamon and a little bit of sugar in it. So you can kind of sweeten things up if you need to. And that can go on it's not necessarily dessert, that can go on like carrots, when you're
Sure.
cooking, or that can go on something else that you're just trying to give it a little different thing. And then and one other company just shot them out. They've been super supportive of me, especially with my Instagram. They follow everything. They even started sending me some of their sauces. Is Bachan's Japanese barbecue sauce. And when I tried it, I had my brother and another friend tell me to try it, and that's like childhood wrapped up in one sauce. And I know Justin will be happy to hear that. Hopefully, I'll be interviewing him at some point. But I've been using their sauce regular on the regular, and I've been giving it away and as gifts and to everybody because once you find something really good, you want someone else to try it, And I think that's part of who I am that my mom gave me is just is that thing, you
Yeah,
experience it
absolutely.
yourself, but you want someone else to have it. And so by sharing it and them getting experience, and then you hear the feedback, they're like, oh yeah, that one's really good. Like he's got a bunch of sauces. There's, a regular, there's a gluten-free, there's a hot and spicy, and a yuzu. Yuzu is a Japanese lemon, and that gives it another flavor profile. That happens to be my favorite one to use right now. And so that's Bachan's. And they're out of Sebastopol, California. He's, homegrown out here.
Cool.
Bachan is a term of endearment. It's short for grandma. So if you call your grandma Obachan in Japanese, and Bachan is short for grandma, and it's his grandma's recipe, is a family recipe that he just developed for the masses, and that thing's crushing too.
Super rad. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this and write all this down.
uh,
So,
you could
cooking
just hit me
tips.
up
Oh,
and
sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, I'll definitely give you the list for all that stuff. But yeah, what do you want to know?
So, when it comes, I cook a lot of wild game. I'm always looking for
Hmm.
different ways. I have my tried and trues that I stick to, but have you had much experience cooking wild game? I know you're an outdoors guy and stuff like that, and have sourced some exotic stuff before. What would be a go
It's
to for that?
I think I mean I don't have a ton, to be honest, I don't have a ton of experience. It's funny that you asked me that because it's coming into light more and more these days, especially a lot more of my friends are hunters, and a lot of them are asking me to cook stuff, and I'm actually going to be testing some elk recipes very soon. I've got a friend that was like, "Hey, I'm tired of just throwing it in the pan. I'm tired of just putting it on the smoker with not knowing what to do with it." Yeah, it smokes it nice, but they're looking for different flavors, so I definitely want to test some more. I don't have a ton of experience, but I have a ton of experience cooking meat in general. So I'm just gonna take that experience and move it to wild game. And so a
Perfect.
lot of times my thing, so like let's say just for chicken, I like marinating the chicken. I like marinating chicken thighs, and given that day before marinade, it's going to give you some serious flavor when it goes on the barbecue or the smoker the next day, and you have this depth of flavor. And thighs are really good. I mean, you can do it with chicken breast as well or a whole chicken, but thighs really take on a good flavor, and it's hard to overcook them. I mean, you can, but they're easy to cook, and it's going to give you like a nice profile. So marinating is a favorite thing for me to do, for
I
sure.
think the biggest thing that I've found with game meat is not overcooking it, which is super simple to do. I mean, it
Yeah,
literally the venison steaks that I cook a lot of times and elk too, they tend to be thinner
yeah,
cuts. So like I'll fire up the Traeger or whatever, I'm cooking it on a flat top, whatever, and it's literally like a matter of minutes and the thing's pretty much at a medium rare, like within a couple minutes.
yeah. I mean, I have a ton of experience with pork, of course. So if there's ton of boar hunters out there and pig hunters out there. There's so much you can do with pork, and not just with the main tenderloin or pork chop, but you have like pork butt, which you can make into Kahlua pork, which is a Hawaiian style, pulled pork, and you can do that in an Instant Pot. You don't have to do anything fancy. You can throw it in an Instant Pot, and it's done in like 2 hours. And you throw the whole thing in, bone in, and everything, and you make a broth for it. You add water, soy sauce, garlic. You can add onions, pepper. You can add some spice if you want. You can throw jalapeno in there if you want. You can throw some orange peel, orange zest, or even a slice of orange. Throw it in there for some flavor. And then just let it cook down. Um, and then you get this you get this gorgeous, this hunk of meat that's turned into this beautiful pulled pork, and you can
Nice.
have it any which way you want by itself. You can add the cabbage with it, which is a Hawaiian style, or you can all of a sudden turn around and make it into a sandwich or throw it over rice and make it into a rice bowl. So I like doing that. Like also that's kind of one thing that don't take a some of the interest like some of the common cuts of meat, like turning them into something really cool. Like that's a common cut, and people like, oh, I don't know what to do with pork butt or pork shoulder. Well, braise it, let it cook down.
Yeah.
Maybe do red wine and tomato sauce and some vegetables, and then let it cook down and get super soft and tender, and then all of a sudden it's a whole nother dish. And yeah, it does take time, sometimes 2 to 5 hours if you're using an oven, but man, does the reward for it is you can't replace it. Like it's worth that extra effort. So I like doing that too. Sometimes, like beef ribs are kind of an underrated cut that's not usually used. Everyone goes for pork ribs, baby backs or St. Louis style ribs. But like a
Hmm.
beef rib is relatively inexpensive. They're usually kind of like tossed away because I know there's
And
not a
if they're
ton of meat
done
on
right,
there.
holy shit, man. I've had
But
some
yeah,
good,
you
yeah.
you throw them on the smoker for a few hours and they're good to go. You just pick your favorite rub or just season it, and then do this. I started to learn from a few guys is they do the honey butter uh, halfway through. So it's called the 3-2-1 method on ribs. It's 3 hours by itself with a dry rub. The next 2 hours, and obviously you're playing this by ear with how much you're making, but it's a relatively easy rule. And then 2 hours, you take some aluminum foil, you put it meat side down on a couple pads of butter and some honey, and then you wrap that up and you let that sit meat side down in the smoker for another 2 hours. Pull that, open it up, flip it over. It should be nice and super tender. And if you want to sauce it, you can sauce it, or you can just cook it and let it get a little crust, and it's good to go.
That's awesome.
That's something that I kind of learned playing around with the Traeger, and it comes out ridiculously good.
Yeah, no, all those little tips are key, man. That's you just made me think of some stuff. I'd love to do a collaborative elk recipe with you at some point or something. Like, I'm no chef. I don't have any sort of training. I just know what I like, but like an elk carne asada style type recipe because one of my favorite ways to cook elk is just heat up the cast iron flat top on
Mm-hmm.
the actual Traeger, sear it, to a medium rare, but do it with, some jalapeno and cilantro and some lime juice. Oh my god, dude, it's killer. But I'm sure you could even make it taste better. So we'll have to get into that.
Yeah, I'm definitely down. That sounds super good. And yeah, like hopefully I got a friend that wants to supply me with some elk, and I'll be testing that out, and I'll be talking to you guys because yeah, for me, hunting is new to me. I'm still new to it, and hopefully I'm healing up and I'll be able to get back into it. And I do want that full circle moment where I'm going out and getting my own food, bringing it home, and then I got the extra bonus if I got some training and I can and try to cook it in a good way and cherish
Absolutely.
that meat. But it's fun, and yeah, there's a lot of good recipes. There's a lot of good guys that are game cooks out there, and it's new to me, but I have no problem trying stuff out for sure.
Yeah, I would suggest too, follow my buddy Jason the Butcher. We've had him on the podcast.
Oh yeah,
He
okay.
is super knowledgeable when it comes to processing game, and he actually teaches, operators and special forces guys, Green Berets, you name it, how to properly select, process, cook everything game while they're in the field, which is pretty cool. And he actually gave us a really good tip the last time he was on that I think anybody could use. A lot of times when I get my venison, it's a fast process when we're in the butchering process and wrapping it up, and then I'll kind of trim it as we thought or whatever to use it. But instead of just
Hmm.
taking those trimmings and completely throwing them away, like making a broth or something with them, like do something so you're not wasting any of it. And especially when it comes to like the neck meat, or sometimes when you let it hang for a while, it'll start to get this natural crust on it just from oxygen being around the meat and stuff. And you can utilize some of that stuff that you cut off. And it's super good, man. So shout out to Jason for hooking me up with those ideas. He'd be a great guy for you to connect with.
100%. I think you were telling me about him for
Yeah,
sure.
I think we've
I would
mentioned it before.
definitely want to spend some time with him.
I'll see if I
And
can put
yeah,
you guys
and
in touch.
yeah, for sure. And I think you kind of gave me an idea of things to do with either game meat or meat in general. Is like a good chimichurri sauce is always nice to make.
Yeah.
It's relatively easy. It's relatively easy. It's nice, just fresh herbs, some garlic, some spice, some oil, some vinegars. Add that all mixed together, and you take whatever meat you're cooking, whatever cut it is, whether it's steak, whether it's a tenderloin, whether it's backstrap, you know, however you like to cook it, because some people like it well done, medium rare, rare, whatever it is. But like you add that element of this fresh sauce because chimichurri is relatively it's all fresh ingredients for the
I
most part.
prefer putting it on the meat after it's cooked, like,
Yeah,
as you're
yeah,
eating it almost. So it's kind of like that
yeah,
cool versus hot type thing. And man, it's
yeah. It's
killer
like a
if you get
thin.
into some Tascarias or something. Are really good, some really good chimichurris, man.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of like you were talking about like what to do with meat afterwards, and it's like yeah, it's great, it's cooked, but let's add that nice fresh element to it. And yeah, that's a sauce that doesn't have to be cooked. It's just made, and you can have that ready to go once
I
your
think
meat's ready. And then
sometimes too
yeah.
with wild game, you're 100% right on that. Sometimes with wild game is introducing, like what I've found, introducing different cultural stuff to it, right? Because a lot of people just think meat, salt, whatever. But like, if you start going down some of those like different cultural routes or seasonings or something like that, where maybe elk aren't in the region, right?
Yeah,
You could
for
definitely
sure.
change it up
For
that way
sure.
too.
Yeah.
I know you're a big outdoors guy. You do some overlanding and stuff. I know you haven't been able to get out too much lately with the injury and everything like that. But when you are out, what are you doing when you're out there cooking? Are you taking the same level of intensity and stuff, or is it just like a grab and go type stuff? Or what are you doing in the outdoors when you are out and able to get out and recreate to cook? Or
Yeah, so my go-to is to take a take a couple steaks, vacuum pack them, freeze them, and then take them out with me. So like if it's just for a weekend, like the last time we camped, I brought the cast iron stove. I brought a And I'm always super specific so people know what they have. But it's a just one burner stove on a butane. So it's just a butane can on a one burner. Brought the cast iron with me because I wasn't sure the setup out there on the campsite. If there's an open fire, then I'll definitely go for the open fire, add some wood, and just cook over open fire for sure. But sometimes you can just do that with the cast iron, which that's what I love about a cast iron pan is it's so
Uh,
versatile. You can throw it on fire.
you
It's
could
not
kill
going to
somebody
break.
with it.
Yeah, you can protect yourself in
Yeah.
self-defense. And it's good for everything. But yeah, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take some steaks with me for sure. Maybe I've done a couple things like I did a backpacking trip with some guys that I brought the steaks with me. They were pre-frozen and pre-seasoned. So I got
Oh,
them
there you go.
fresh, seasoned them because I didn't want to get out there and be like, oh, I don't, maybe I lost the seasoning or it spilled or I didn't want it to run into that problem where I didn't season the meat. So I seasoned it fresh and then vacuum packed it, froze them, and then they were ready to go. And when you're backpacking, sometimes it's cold, so it was good enough where okay, we're gonna eat it that night. So if you're backpacking all day, 7-10 miles or whatever, and then that night it's defrosted in your bag, or just a couple Ziploc bags or whatever, it's defrosted, and you're grilling it that night. And so you all of a sudden, you got your buddy who's got a Mountain House meal or a packaged meal, and you're like, hey, we got steaks tonight. He's like, what? I was like, yeah, we're not eating. We save that freeze dried spaghetti for tomorrow because we're having
Yeah.
steak and asparagus tonight. And I'll bring an asparagus. So you just try to bring easy things to cook, whether you're going to cook it over fire or you're going to cook it on a mini stove. Like especially if you're backpacking, you're pretty limited to what stove you're cooking it on. Most of the time, it's hot water. But if you can do open fire, yeah, I'll grab a steak, cook it over open fire. So that situation, I brought one of those. Just it's like a shelf grate. It just has like a little grate on it, so you could use
Yep.
that as a grill. It was like a $10 item.
Over
I
some
brought
coals
that
or
with
something.
me. Yeah, it folds over. It's got two little legs on it. Folds over. So I brought that. We started a fire, put the grate over that, and I cooked the steaks on there. The steaks were money because they were seasoned already, and then I even seasoned the asparagus with salt and pepper and butter, and then cooked the asparagus over fire, and then we were good to go. Steak and asparagus out in the backcountry, out in the wilderness. So
Yeah,
that's
no,
that's
I've
a relative.
I've been super
No, go
fortunate
ahead.
too to have some foragers on the podcast. So that's stepped up my game in
Mm,
the backcountry a little bit too, is like looking for food while you're walking or whatever and finding feral asparagus or mushrooms or, even some roots and stuff from certain like dandelions or dandelion greens, like all that stuff. There's so much edible stuff out there that you can kind of grab and go as you're walking in or packing in too, which is
yeah, I definitely
totally
want to
stepped up
learn.
the game.
Definitely, yeah. Like a lot of guys right now are doing, hunting for morel mushrooms right
Yeah.
now, and those are super good and cooked up. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just knowing what to look for. There is a fake morel. I just found out that there's a mock morel mushroom that's the one you don't eat. It's kind of a more reddish color, I think. I don't want to give any wrong information, but there is a fake one and there's a real one. So
Yeah, no,
it's
you
it's
got to be
knowing,
careful
yeah,
with what you eat there too. It's
you
like
do got to be
you
super
better
careful.
100% certain that you know what it is before you eat some mushrooms, or you could have a bad trip or a bad day for sure.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah,
yeah, over a packaged meal, like a freeze-dried meal, that's my go-to
oh
is
yeah,
bringing a steak at least for the first night, and then extendedly, yeah, you're gonna have to have some ultralight freeze-dried meals to sustain you, but at least your first night's gonna you're gonna eat well.
I hate them. No disrespect to any of those companies out there like Mountain House and stuff. They are on the better end of that, but I can't stand them, dude. I'm too much
That's
of a
that's kind of
foodie, I
another
think.
one. That's kind of another idea I kind of have in the back of my mind. Nobody steal this, but would like to do some better freeze-dried meals for sure too.
No,
And I
that'd be
know there's some
great.
guys that do them themselves, but I'd like to throw my flair into it as well.
For
But
sure.
yeah.
Cool. Do you have anything coming up, man? We're kind of running out of time here, and this has been super awesome having you on. We got to do this again in person next time. I know that that's what we were waiting for, but I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's just get Dave on now and get him in here. And the timing was good, man. I think we've had an awesome conversation. But what do you got coming
Yeah,
up
and
in the works? I know you got podcasts dropping. You're always at some sort of cooking event, it seems like, doing cool
yeah,
shit.
I mean,
So
that's been fun too, and that's been adding to, the networking podcasting base too, is just learning from other people. And yeah, like I went to a knife forged to it's called Forged to Table, and it was a lot of bladesmiths were there. Actually, Bachans, that's kind of how I knew about it. Bachans barbecue sauce was one of the sponsors, and yeah, it was a really cool event. Neil Kamimura and his wife Flora came out, and if you guys don't know Neil Kamimura, you need to look him up. This is a bladesmith that's only
stud.
been
Yeah.
for stud that's he's only been forging for 6 years, I think, or 7 years, maybe a little longer. But anyway, awesome, awesome guy, awesome blades. They put on an event. She cooked for everybody. Did open fire Argentinian style cooking. They cooked a whole ribeye, made them into little bows to eat. She did a paella and she did a nice dessert. And so going to events like that was really cool, like because everybody's about food there. Obviously, you have the blade side as well, so you got these guys that are making blades from scratch, so that's really cool. It definitely has that it's two different artists, right? Food and bladesmiths, so that's really cool. And then I think for me, I just working on the podcast, just getting out there and meeting new people and going to the people that I know already that I want people to hear their story. So I'll be doing that as much as possible, of course, here locally, and then obviously I'll start branching out to all over. And if I'm able to get out to somebody, like I know we were supposed to, if I want to, I'd love to come out and visit you in Colorado and hang out there and experience what Colorado has to offer. But yeah, I'm on the podcast. So, Food Origins podcast.com is my website. That has pretty much everything you need to know. That has my Instagram, a blog that I'll be adding to more of, where it has my recipes. Um, we got merch coming in the works for shirts and stuff and hats. I've gotten a lot of requests for that. And then my Instagram, of course, always has my day to day kind of stuff. So you'll see, where I ate or what I cooked today, or, I don't always post it just because, it's, maybe not the best easy thing to see. And you get to see me doing day to day stuff. Like maybe I'm at this store and I'll post it up. So that's, on Instagram, it's food.origins underscore. And then, of course, the podcast has its own Instagram, Food Origins Podcast on Instagram, and that showcases all the guests and any other things that are going on with the podcast as far as gear, or maybe I'll post a little story about, hey, this is the gear I'm using. It's helped me along the way, and then I'll update people on there as far as the guests, and I like to give the guests their thing. I appreciate them taking their time out and showcasing what they have and what they're all about. So yep. And it's I appreciate you having me on for sure.
Yeah,
I'm honored.
absolutely, man. This is a community.
I'm
I want
honored.
to do it again in the future, man. This has been a lot of fun, and I always enjoy talking to you. Yeah, I think as much as we can collaborate together or be a community as podcasters in general, I think it just
Hmm.
helps everybody out. So, yeah, I encourage you, if you're a Mountainside listener, go check out Dave's podcast. It's fucking awesome. If you want some good food tips, definitely go there. If you're hungry, do not look at his Instagram page because it'll make you even hungrier. But yeah, give him a follow, check him out. Dave, thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. And stay in touch. Yeah, let's get you out to Colorado. I'd love to have you. You're
Definitely.
welcome anytime. And we got a studio here. I can set you up with some different people to record with too. While you're here, you can use my
Yep.
studio, whatever you want. So we'll try
Awesome.
to
That'd be
coordinate that. All
great.
right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Mountainside Podcast. If you haven't had a chance to do this already, please take a moment, follow, like, subscribe, or rate on whatever platform you catch the Mountainside Podcast at. Also, if you'd like some more information on upcoming episodes, safety tips, access to all of our affiliates, and all the badass discounts that we get here at the Mountainside Podcast, check out themountainsidepodcast.com.